the hardest changes are often those changes that come with success. Especially in fast-growing companies, you will see that every single stage, every success actually requires complete transformations and overhauls of the operating system of the company, of the organization. You see this nowhere more illustratively as in startups. And you can take a really good example for this and take a page from the playbook of a pirate ship. Think about a pirate ship. You have a captain holding together a crew that is tightly bonded, that trusts their captain. And a pirate ship is very agile. It can go very fast. It doesn't have to report to anyone. It can turn around 180 degrees at a whim if the captain decides so, out of an impulse, out of a gut decision. And the crew members don't mind. They actually enjoy that adventure. They enjoy the agility. They enjoy being part of something where the typical rules, the typical bureaucracy does not apply. Everything is held together by camaraderie, by emotions, by personalities, right? Everything is held together by common success that's being achieved, shared struggles. That's very romantic. There's a certain adventure romanticism to that. And you will see this in many early stage startups. And who are the group crew members? Some are personal friends of the captain. Others are some poor souls who didn't even know what they got themselves into and just ended up there, playing along. In many cases, you'll find that the pirate ship is very successful. Because if you are a pirate ship in a world of rules, of regulations, of really predictable behaviors, and you're looting large ships, then obviously you have an advantage. You have an edge, right? You are very fast, you're very agile, and you can exploit vulnerabilities, opportunities that others or that more bureaucratic or more complex structures or fleets could not. So you become addicted to that success. But the more successful you become, the more you get also addicted to those behaviors that give you success at that stage. The impulsivity, the change of course on a whim, the waking up in the morning, today we're going to do this, tomorrow we're going to do that. And these behaviors often become very much ingrained in the DNA. They become a subconscious program of this is why we are successful. But every pirate ship at some point reaches the phase or the area of diminishing returns. Like the more you do, the more after initial successes, after initial euphoria, at some point it ebbs down a bit. The success slows down a bit, the results don't show much effort, and results are not always as proportionate anymore. You put in way more effort, see way less results. You've been spoiled by the success. Your crew members have. Now you start chasing vanity metrics, you chase symbolic successes, you change things that feel good. You start chasing status instead of actual results. And so this happens also in startups. There's a lot of parallels. But there comes a point when the captain realizes, all right, how we operate right now, or at least at the scale, we are limited. We could be even more successful, or we could break out of the stagnation, out of our current limitations, if we added a couple of more ships. Now, in the beginning, that sounds like a good idea. Add just a few more ships. Translate this to startups. Hire more people. Hire a professional sales function. Hire somebody for human resources, for HR. Get somebody on board for marketing. Maybe have an accountant. Have an office manager. So you start adding people to the mix. You start building around that pirate crew structure. Now, once you started adding a couple of new ships, you realize that the moment you try to turn the ship around 180 degrees, because you had a good idea, and you saw there's a ship to loot over there, it doesn't work that easily anymore. Because the moment you turn around 180 degrees, while you are going in formation or with a group of other ships, you would just run into the ship next to you and would sink both of you. And often, then scaling or growing the company is being perceived as a limitation, actually, as something inconvenient. We used to be way faster. Everything feels more heavy now. Everything feels more bureaucratic. We now need to talk to people. We need to align. This feels tiring. The original pirate crew members get a bit annoyed, but they play along. They also understand now that it's more pirate ships. They have, of course, more firepower. They have more They have more impact. They can do more things than they were able to do when they were smaller, but it already starts to feel different. Now, you also have to keep in mind that with those different pirate ships, either they have their own captains, or at least they have somebody in charge of that ship, or somebody who is a team leader. They need to be communicated with. And as the single pirate ship was very much in the mode of not being accountable to anyone and just going after it, right? Move fast and break things. They're not used to communicating to people. So a lot of those other ships are most of the time pretty much clueless about what's going on. And they're just trying to somehow catch up. And that obviously renders them more and more ineffective. Because if the pirate captain decides, over there's our target, and just charges ahead without telling everybody, of course, the rest of the ships would not be prepared, and their presence would be rendered relatively ineffective overall. And the same can happen in early stage companies, where the old pirate mentality just leads to pushing through, pursuing opportunities, jumping on them without really communicating or getting the rest of the newly built organization on board. And most departments, employees, are just left playing catch up. And that also renders them quite ineffectively compared to the salary that you're paying them, right? And the onboarding costs and the hiring costs and all of this. And so it's not that the pirate captain does not want to be effective. It's just that there is a certain habit of success. And everything that brought success in the past is now being questioned. Oh, you actually have to take a step back before you take action. You have to communicate with people, or at least while you're taking action, communicating with them. But then that could distract you from actually taking action. So it is a huge change in mentality. It is a huge change also in processes, if there had been any in the first place, and in the operating mode of an organization. Now, as the fleet grows, as it becomes more successful, and over time they will straighten things out, they will add more ships to it. And the more ships you add to that fleet, the more coordination is required, the more communication is needed. Whereas the original crew members were pretty much content with fighting things out in a fist fight if there was a disagreement. Now they have to communicate with 5 other fleet captains, with 5 other captains of ships. And suddenly all the behaviors that have worked in the past are redundant. And so people need to adjust, need to professionalize, need to upskill also in many ways, because some of those who are now being hired happen to be technically or professionally way more competent, or had very successful track records in their own career, that can feel also intimidating to the original crew. And so you start seeing the early sources of office politics, of politics in general. Original crew members will now start clinging to their positions, staying in good grace and good favor with the captain, who now has emotional sentiment towards those who rode into the sunset with him a couple of years earlier. Whereas the new professional team members, or pirate ship captains, are frustrated beyond imagination about the lack of professionalism, the lack of process, the lack of etiquette, the lack of in many ways also competence. And so the dynamic is that the old guard will, of course, try to reject and resist any attempts at professionalization. They will reject and resent the newcomers who are competent, who are hard-hitting, hard-charging. And even though those are the people who can bring the entire effort to the next level, it feels very threatening. And people now have something to lose. They have not only their positions, their jobs to lose, but also their entire self-image, their idea of success. We were successful because we didn't have these rules. We were successful because we didn't have all these people around us, all this noise, right? Why can't we just scale it back, scale it down to where we used to be one pirate ship again? And there are companies who do that. And there are companies for whom this is a good decision to make. But the moment you're tied up into investor capital, the moment you took a seed round, a Series A round, a Series B round, it's not that easy to scale down your fleet, because no, you're not the only person calling the shots anymore. There's a board. There are other people who are deciding and have a say in what is going to happen with the future of the company. And they do not want to see scaling down. They want to see scaling up even more, because they have to report to their own funds, to their own superiors, that the company that they invested in is actually growing. It is showing month-over-month growth. It is showing success. Whatever way success is defined. Sometimes it's defined based on vanity metrics like headcount increase or top line growth. Other times it is actually measured also on more efficient metrics or like real business metrics. And it really depends on the level of perspective of those who are part of the decision-making process, if changes can be made or not. Most of the time, the original pirate crew members don't get what they want, and the organization scales even further. Now you add uniforms, now you add ranks, now you add hierarchy. Now you're not talking about 12 crew members sitting on deck and drinking rum bottles with each other, but now you're talking about a fleet of 500, of 800 crew members and captains and mid-level managers, and they all have a say, they all have opinions, they all have skills that they bring to the table. And now you need to have complex systems of communication, and it doesn't work anymore that decisions run through the original pirate captain. It doesn't work anymore that everything runs through the approval of the founder. Now the structure itself carries the effort. And if you take it a step further, you will run into a world where the organization becomes so institutionalized that regardless of going out on the oceans and looting other boats or merchant ships, now actually the money is not even made there anymore, but the money, the actual value creation, is made somewhere at the port in an office of accountants and financial magicians who are now shifting around the balance sheets to please the investors and kind of show certain results. If you see it from that angle, then we are successful. And there are the entire value creation chain now moves into the abstract, moves into the theoretical. This happens in organizations who reach a very high degree of abstraction and complexity. And it's not to be said that any of this is desirable or good or even bad. It's just the nature and evolution of organizations as they keep growing and growing and growing, and especially if they grow without intention. If they grow just like wild plants that are not being pruned, that are not being steered into a certain direction with a certain intent. And so for companies that are scaling, they have to be aware that there is a lot of change ahead of them. And when we think of change management, we often think of things are not working, things are dysfunctional, and now they need to be broken open and be reconfigured, and that is certainly true. But we always think, or often think, about change management in the sense of there is a huge dysfunction that needs to be solved. Something is not working, and this is why we need to change. The reality is sometimes it is because things are working, you need to change. Because you have achieved 100 million in annual recurring revenue, because of that, you need to change. You need to reach the next level. You need to prepare the organization, the structures, the systems to hold the weight of this new financial reality, of this new commercial reality. And I think that's something that's sometimes hard to wrap your mind around, that the more successful you are, the more change actually is being forced on you. And ideally, you want to get ahead of the change, be proactive about it, stand ahead of the curve instead of being swept away by it. And once it forces you into reactivity and into urgency and into a very disempowered position. Ultimately, scaling, as glorious as it sounds, and as much as also founders compare themselves with other founders, they scaled, they achieved these numbers, we need to achieve the same. It is not always the most desirable pursuit. It's not always the most desirable outcome. And I have personally seen many companies that scaled prematurely and burned themselves in the process. And so scaling itself cannot be a goal. Scaling can only be a means to a goal, a means to an end, a means to a certain end state that needs to be achieved. And either if that is a permanent end state, like an exit or an acquisition, or it is a temporary milestone, scaling should be seen as a tactic and not a means or a strategy in itself, an end in itself. If you take it like this, you will also see that everything that you need to get there is actually the necessary prerequisite. And all these changes in the organization, are just the necessary medicine to get the company where it needs to be. But if you think of scaling as something that is just exciting or something that is a proof of success, you could have a bitter awakening, rude awakening, that scaling in many ways can be very uncomfortable, and it will force a lot of discomfort on your original team, on your original founding crew, and it is certainly not always the most pleasant experience.